Amen.
Amen.
Amen. But but it was powerful what she said, and it opened my eyes just in that brief moment.
Mm-hmm.
Turn with me to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 22 and 1 Samuel chapter 24. In between 22 and 24 is what I will be dealing with this morning. 1 Samuel, that's in the New Testament, the Old Testament. First Samuel. Say amen. We have 1 Samuel chapter 22.
Amen.
1 Samuel chapter 22 and 1 Samuel chapter 24. I'm not going to be able to read all of it. I had highlighted some points in here about this story, but I'm gonna read chapter 22, verses 1 through 5. I'm gonna just read 1 through 5. 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 1. Everyone have it?
Amen.
David therefore departed from there and escaped to a cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. I'm reading from the New King James. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontent, gathered to him. So he became captain over them. And there were about 400 men with him. Verse 3, David went from there to Manasseh of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother come here with you, till I know what God will do for me. So he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Now the prophet Gad said to David, do not stay in your stronghold. Depart and go to the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Horeb. You may be seated.
Amen.
Right now, people, David is what we call in a storm. He's in a storm. But I got a question, and I'm going to use the same topic I've been using because it seemed like it is appropriate, it could be used for this. A what shall I do situation. A what shall I do situation. David is in a storm. We just experienced a hurricane. A hurricane is a violent, tropical, cyclonic storm of the western North Atlantic, having wind speed of or in the excess of 72 miles per hour. So we have a storm that David is going through, and people, we just had embraced a hurricane. You know, they said that this is the worst that ever had happened to Houston, and they're putting it along the scales and the lines of probably being more devastating than Katrina. Because when Katrina happened and it hit New Orleans, it hit one area. But when it hit Houston, it hit everywhere. And then the storm, not only that it came, the hurricane came, it settled down. It is settled in one place. And it caused things to have people to go through amazing things that they never thought that would happen to them.
Yeah.
Did nobody plan for this?
Right.
You know, if you're used to having storms in Houston, you know, we done had our share of storms, and you know, some that faked us out. You know, people then panicked and got up out of here. But this storm came and it stayed.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of people that lost a lot of, they done lost a lot of material things.
Right.
But like Sister Wills was sharing in some of her lesson about how Satan comes along and distract us with certain things. And you know, people, I'm gonna just say this, and I'm gonna just tell you, when people was mentioning the storm to me, because actually I didn't know one was coming. I really did. It was brought up to me, and I was like, oh, really? A storm is coming? Oh, you haven't heard? And you know, I guess maybe because when I'm in my shop, I might just have it on ESPN, but they didn't interrupt ESPN or First Take or nothing like that, talking about the storm or nothing like that. So the storm really caught me off guard, and I think it was my wife who first mentioned it to me, or maybe one of the customers.
Right.
But I just told the customer briefly when they told me, whoever it was that told me, I just say, well, you know what, all I'm going to do is pray like I always do. And I'm going to pray that I can get through the storm. And, you know, and then people, I tend, with me personally, when situations like this come up, I go in my own little prayer closet, and I go to talking to God. I go to telling God, I say, God, if this house and everything get destroyed, you know I don't have the money to make up for it. So God, if it be thy will, but if it be some compassion now, can you let it pass me? That's something I always say every year when they tell me that, you know, hurricane season. And I find myself, you know what, people, even with the slightest of rain, I find myself praying to God, say, God, you know my situation. You know, you see my bank account before I see it ahead of time. And Lord, you know I can't stand this. So Lord, can you please not let nothing happen to where I'm living? I pray for the cars, you know, that I ain't going to go out there and drive it in no hot water. But then again, I'm not, you know, I pray to God that I don't get in no accidents, and God, watch over me. And people, as the storm really got close, after they done told me, all I really saw is people making preparations. And you're supposed to make preparations during a storm.
Right.
That's common sense. That's reality. You're supposed to. But I seen more people preparing more than I seen people coming together and pray before the storm.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I said, what if, people, think about this, what if you take all these churches and all these Christians, the mega churches and the little churches, and all us that proclaim to be Christians in Houston would have all loaded up on buses, charter buses, school buses, cars, vans, and drove down to Galveston and hold hands as far as we can spread out and begin to pray on one accord and start telling God and asking God, but telling the storm, we ain't talking about go somewhere else because we don't want nobody to be affected.
Right.
Turn around and go where you came from.
Yes.
Or better yet, to die out. But in the midst of preparation, what you're supposed to do, we never thought of that. It was just a thought. I'm not saying, you know, and one man couldn't have went down there and done that. But I learned something. If it had happened, what would have happened? But since it didn't happen, now that we're in a storm, because a lot of times what God will show us we can speak to our storm and cause it to disappear.
Yeah.
But sometimes God will allow us to go through the storm to see how much we can endure. So in this case, we had to endure. So when I thought about it, I say, man, you know, it's always, you know, some of y'all probably think like I think from time to time. And that's not far-fetched, people, to think like that. To say, what if we always speaking about faith, and as Christians, we trying to get people to see how great God is and how awesome God is. But when storms come up, we think like the world. Rather than thinking like Christians. And I bet you I'm not the only one thought of that. You see what I'm saying? But people were probably saying, how can we can get some? Because look, people, I told you I didn't know nothing about the storm. But there are some people who spend day after day watching the news. They watch the news, people, all day long. And knew this storm was coming probably when it first developed out there, which could have been a month ago, which gave us enough time. See, look, look, y'all know the Bible. I know some of y'all know the Bible. And I know y'all have heard some of the stories in the Bible. Because in the book of Mark chapter 4, you don't have to turn it down, you can write it down, but Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41, and then in verse, it talks about Jesus spoke to the storm. See, the disciples was in a storm. And it said that Jesus just spoke to the storm. And if you got a Bible like mine, it'll show you Matthew talk about it, Mark talk about it, and Luke talk about it. Each one of them talk about it from a different perspective, but they're talking about the same storm. But when you go to Mark chapter 4, 38, you know what Mark said? He said the disciples woke Jesus up. Now, this is the story about not Jesus walking on the water, not that storm. We talking about the storm. When the storm was going, Jesus, they was on the top of the boat panicking while Jesus was below the boat sleeping. And they ran down and they told Jesus, they say, Jesus, wake up. And guess what they say after that? Don't you care that we drown? Jesus got up, since y'all woke me up, walked to the top of the ship, looked at the storm, and he said, peace, be still. And the Bible say the wind calmed down and the storm shut up. And you know what they did? They said they looked at Jesus and said, wow, what type of man that can speak to a storm and it be quiet? Y'all remember Jesus said that I give you this same power.
Amen.
See, we talk about how, when we preach to people and churches preach to people and we go to talking about walking on scorpions and all this kind of stuff and how we got this kind of faith and that kind of faith, we don't really, but it's just words.
Yeah.
It's really just words that we utter out. And we're trying to get you to see it, but we don't believe it ourselves. And if the preacher don't believe it, and we trying to push it off on you, and you run and try to tell somebody else out there, and you don't even much believe it, because the preacher don't believe it. He said, what manner of man can speak to a storm, and the storm back out off of it? Then he, look, you know what he said to him in verse 38? You know when they said, don't thou care that we drown? In Mark chapter 6, verse 52, you know what it says in that? This the same? Now, Mark is telling the story. Matthew just told it, Mark just told it earlier in Mark chapter 35. But in verse 38, he said, do you care that we drown? But when you move to Matthew, Matthew says it like this. He said, no, forgive me. You move to Mark chapter 6.
Okay.
When Jesus is walking on the water in the storm, to get to the end of the verse first, Mark 6:52, listen to what he says. He said, for they had not understood about the loaves, the bread. They heard, their hearts were hardened. You know why I said that? Because what Jesus did, he just fed 5,000 men, not including women and children.
Yeah, yeah.
He told them to pick up the scraps and take it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this story, Jesus constrained them. In other words, he made them get on the boat because he knew another storm was coming.
Right.
So when Jesus when they was in the storm and they saw Jesus walking on the water, they thought it was a ghost. Jesus said, it is I. Peter was the only one to say, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come.
Right.
While the rest stood on the boat. But when Peter got out and walked on the water, he had his eyes on Jesus.
Right.
But he listened to the voices of the people that took his eyes off of Jesus, and he began to sing.
Yeah.
Good thing Jesus was there, because Jesus caught him by the hand as he said, Lord, save me.
Yeah.
And Jesus looked at him, walked him back to the boat. We didn't catch that. The Bible never said Jesus carried him back to the boat. In other words, when he walked and he lost focus, but when he grabbed the hand of Jesus, he walked along on the side of Jesus.
Right.
See, that's our problem. We're listening to the people on the boat.
Come on.
And Jesus said, if you stop listening to them on the boat, you can walk along with me on the water.
Right.
But look at what I'm not through. He said in verse 52, they didn't understand the laws. Why? Because their hearts was hard. In other words, he's saying, you read the word, but you don't comprehend the word, and you don't put it in practice and believe the word. So the same stuff you preaching to them, you don't even much believe yourself.
Thank you.
So therefore, he said, y'all forgot about the laws. Oh, ye of little faith. In other words, he's saying, man, I just fed 5,000 men, not including women and children.
Yeah.
I told you to get the leftovers and to get on the boat.
Yeah.
When the storm came again, after you done went through it last storm, and you see me calm the sea, you forgot that you had your faith diary on the ship with you. In other words, if you would have thought about the loaves, you wouldn't have said I was a ghost.
Yeah. My Lord.
People, we got to grow up in the Word. I'm trying not to. I got a sermon for next Sunday. I'm trying not to go into that sermon because I labeled the sermon Tears.
My Lord.
I just named it Tears. How one could just cry
Yeah.
when they hear the Word of God. Or they study the Word of God.
Yes.
So I'm gonna leave that one alone, but I'm stick. So David now, here we have David and Samuel, chapter 22.
Yeah.
See, people, when we see other folks' storms and we don't go through it,
Right.
it don't affect us.
Yeah.
But when we go through our own storm, I'm talking about a real storm,
Yes.
then it helps you see what other people are going through. In other words, people, I haven't lost nothing, but it don't mean I ain't been through a storm.
Right.
David here has Saul on his track. All Saul wants to do is kill David for no reason. Technically, he do want to kill him for a reason, but the reason is so small. Guess what the reason is, people? He wanted to kill David because the women chanted for David.
Yeah.
He wanted to kill David. Look, when they came back in, when David killed a Philistine, y'all remember that, the giant Goliath? It says, the Bible said when they went in the city, Saul was already used to them cheering his name.
Right.
But they began to start cheering David's name. They say, Saul kills his 1,000. They put a conjunction on it and said, but David kills his tens of thousands. And all of a sudden, the evil spirit came on Saul.
Right.
But check it out. Saul was who the people chose. And God told him, because you don't want me, I'm going to give you somebody just like you. He gave them Saul because because they wanted a king that they can touch, see, and feel.
Right.
And see, this was so amazing about us in America. We pick our presidents and want our president to be righteous
Right.
when we're not. We want right done to us, but don't do right.
Right.
But we pick out the same kind of president that we really are. And then when you say you ain't going to vote, then people outside want to cut you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your right not to vote. If you don't see that this president is going to do what you agreed to according to the Bible, don't vote for him. And keep it moving. And some say, well, you got to pick two or one of the two evils. But I care not to pick neither one of them.
Right.
So that's my right. Now don't go to telling me who died for me, because I know who died for me. And Martin Luther King them didn't die for me. Christ died for me.
Amen.
God already knew in his archives that slaves would be free and how he was going to free them.
Right.
But look at it. If you read Isaiah, Isaiah will tell you how Israel really got in this predicament. And I'm talking about skin color.
Right.
Read it. Read Isaiah. I think it's chapter 6 or chapter 4. Read as one of the other. And God told them how, because you don't listen to me,
Right.
I'm going to put you under people that's going to oppress you, that's going to be foreign to you, all this kind of stuff, because you're so hard-headed. So here we are, we with David, back to David now. David is in a cave, people, because Saul was on his trail.
Right.
And look what God, now, it's one thing to be in a storm, Pierre. But if you're in your storm, you prefer having all the equipment that you need.
Right.
You want to have access to stuff if you're going to go through a storm.
Yeah.
But in this storm, God didn't only put David in the storm or allow David to go through the storm. He didn't give David nothing to work with.
Right.
Check this out. Read the Bible. Look what it says. Follow me in 1 Samuel chapter 22. It says, therefore David departed from there and escaped to a cave, people. David was in a cave. You know, when you're in a cave, you know what that caused you to do? That caused you to meditate on what God done. Especially if you're in a storm. You know, in a storm, we be thinking like, God, did I do something wrong? Or do this supposed to happen? And you don't know if you're coming or going when you're in a storm. And David was in a cave, people. And David mustered up. While he's in the storm, he wrote 3 songs. While he's in the storm, in the cave.
Right.
Look, and then look. So he was in the cave of Adullam. It says, so when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, you know, his brothers was warriors. They was in the service.
Yeah.
And the father heard, they came to David rescue. They came to help David. And it says, verse 2, look what God gave him to work with now. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontent gathered to him. You see that? Can you imagine? And look, and he's sending 400 of them. He's sending 400 men that was distressed, broke, and discontent. See, they was upset with how Saul was running stuff, so they left Saul and tried to team up with David. You know, when you get churches to break up,
Right.
and they mad at the pastor, the last pastor, they want to team up with the next pastor to try to make that church look bad.
Right.
Because they wasn't in agreement. So they torn up with somebody else. And you know the amazing thing about it, they wasn't no help there. And they come to you and ain't no help. So this is what David is dealing with. Not only that, they was in debt. And they was discontent. So look, but look what look what the Bible says though. So he became captain over them.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, because David, God knew David was a good leader. But at the same time, while David was in the cave and God gave him this 400 men, he wrote Psalms 142. He wrote Psalms 142, people, verses 1 through 4. If you don't mind, you can turn it out real quick. I'm going to leave my finger there because I got another Psalms to share with you. Psalms 142. I got to find these suckers quick. Psalms 142, look what he said. Now, Psalms 142, when he wrote it, guess what David was doing? When God, see, this is what we do. He do the same thing when we're in our storm. David, and it's only right that you do this because of where he at. The first thing David did when he was writing in the cave, he wrote Psalms 142. You know what it was? He complained. And that's what a lot of us do when we in our storm. We complain. And look what David says. He said, I cried out to the Lord with my voice. With my voice to the Lord, I made my supplication. He said, I poured out my complaint. So he complained to him. I declared therefore him my trouble. I told him all my troubles.
My Lord.
In other words, he said, I told him, in other words, just imagine, he said, God, look what you gave me to work with in my storm. God, I have nothing to work with.
Yeah.
Haven't you ever felt like that? You trying to, you in your storm and you don't have nothing to work with. It's sometime I hit some financial walls, people. And I'm trying to figure out how can I get something extra with what I do.
Yes. Yes.
And it seemed like, okay, I cut hair for a living, but I can't make them come.
Right. Yeah.
I can cut yards, but I got to go look for a clientele. And that takes time. It seems like everything that I can do, it takes time to accumulate what I need, but I need it now.
Right.
So David began to complain like a lot of us do. So look what he said, Psalm 3. He said, when my spirit was overwhelmed, he said, within me, then you knew my path. He said, in the way in which I walk, they have secretly set a snare before me. He said, look what he said, verse 4. Well, you know, Psalms 4. He said, look on my right hand and see, for there is no one who acknowledge me. Refuge have failed me. No one cares for my soul. He having a pity party. Don't know, look, almost like Elijah. Y'all remember Elijah? I'm the only one left, Lord. Out of all your prophets, I'm the only one left. And this is what he began to do.
Yeah.
He began to complain. He writes, he started writing in the psalm, talking to the Lord, and yet complaining.
My Lord.
He's in a predicament, he's in a storm, and he complains. And you know when you complain in your storm, you only make it worse.
Yes.
And what you do when you make it worse, you show other people around you how weak your faith can be. Because what you should have done, or what you ought to do when you feeling like that, try your best to remember to find a closet to go off on God by yourself.
My Lord.
Don't do it in front of people.
Yes.
Because the minute you try to witness to them, and they didn't see you complain,
Yeah.
and see you didn't give up,
My Lord.
The first thing they gonna say, and you're a Christian,
My Lord.
you supposed to be encouraging me. I find myself encouraging you.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful, people, not to complain in front of those. Look here, when David was in the cave, David complained, but he only complained to God.
Right.
The men didn't see him complain to God. But yet, God made him captain over 400 men, people. Look, the second thing David did, he did this while he was in the cave. He wrote Psalm 57. He wrote Psalm 57 while he was in the cave, people. And you know what Psalm 57 is about? Psalm 57, you know what he did after he complained? Which was a good thing he done it. But you know what he began to do, and all of us should do it? He prayed.
Yes.
Psalm 57, when he wrote it, is a psalm of prayer. And look what he said. Be merciful to me, O God. Have you ever been there? Be merciful to me is an exclamation mark, which means he's getting loud. He said, be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For my soul trusts in you. And in the shadow of your wings I will make my refuge until these calamities have passed by. He said, I will cry out to the God Most High, to God who perform all things for me. He shall send from heaven and save me. He reproaches the ones who will swallow me up. And he paused. Because to the side you see the word salah. Salah means to pause. And think about what David is saying, or think about what you are saying.
Yeah.
See, don't rush through a comma, because a comma means to pause and pay attention to.
Right.
And this is what David did. And then he said, God shall send forth his mercy and his truth. He said, my soul is among lions. See, Saul was after him, people, and Saul was coming with over 1,000 men for David.
Yeah.
He wanted to kill David.
Right.
And David is in his cave writing to God. But check it out, people. He complained. So you know that didn't work. He prayed. And check it out, people. And you're supposed to always pray. But just because you pray and you're in your storm, don't mean it's going to change. Look at what happened. You don't think a lot of people was praying when Harvey was here? But Harvey was here now. And they prayed. And Harvey still flooded Houston.
My Lord.
See, there's some times you can pray and nothing changed.
Yeah.
Check it out. When I said nothing, and pay attention to this, it's going to be some times you pray and nothing changed.
Right.
Nothing around you is going to change. Why? Because it don't have to. David is in a cave writing songs.